What about UK government policy?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I don't think we're going to quite meet that challenge just yet. I suppose it's worth putting out a little bit of the context that we've been working in with regards to the developing the UK's position on the broader HFA2, but also specifically on the point with regards to climate change. It's been, I think, a pretty collaborative process, both with non-government actors and internally to government. And our priority has emerged within the context of the post-2015 broader development agenda, and moving and looking ahead to the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016. The key focal point that we've had in our negotiations to date has been on trying to establish, and you used the word earlier, coherence between the range of global policy processes that are underway or getting underway in the case of the World Humanitarian Summit. And that's been quite challenging because people's idea of what that coherence looks like, what we mean by that, has been quite different. Our perspective is try to take I would argue, a rather maximalist approach to the idea of coherence, trying to get that included in the new framework in a way that really recognises that, in the case of climate change, that it's more than just a driver of risk, and that we need to use it as a platform to really transform our approach. Not just to disaster risk reduction, but across the development and climate change agendas. Others see it very much more narrowly, I think, and are looking at specific mechanisms, specific examples that they want expressly put into the framework to carry the day. And that's, on the one hand, had an effect of polarising the debate within the intergovernmental negotiations, I think, but on the other hand, has really forced us to look at what we need to be doing, need to be pushing in the next year to 18 months to ensure that we achieve our objective, which really is to make sure that these issues, and particularly disaster risk reduction and the broader resilience agenda, are really integrated and mainstreamed across these global policy platforms. So there's a bit of a narrative arc that we're following in the sense of saying that Sendai is really the first stop on a rather long journey for official bods such as myself and others around the world to consistently be pushing this message of integrating disaster risk reduction, raising its profile, but not saying that it is I think, which was perhaps one of the failings of the current framework, Hyogo framework, is that it appeared far too standalone. We needed it to be much more centre stage, much more featured in the debate and the discussion around reduction of poverty, particularly from the DFID perspective. So the UK's position, I think, going into Sendai is very much about trying to seek that coherence, trying to get that consensus that we do sense is there, and I think certainly came out from the regional consultations and the consultations ahead of the formal negotiation process that started in July last year, but really trying to solidify that. Whether we've been entirely successful, I think, well, you can read the framework for yourself and take a view on whether we've been successful to date. There's still time, I think. We've still got a final round of negotiations that I'm sure will go through the night during Sendai. But I think we now need to be a little bit more realistic and temper our expectations around what language we can get in Sendai and what we can use that language for to move the debate on in the other global policy forums that are going on. So I'm thinking particularly on the SDGs, particularly on the Financing for Development tract, which is one of the ones that we have been pushing pretty hard as the right tract to really push for financing for disaster risk reduction. We don't necessarily see the HFA2 as necessarily the right framework to reflect the detail. And then also, obviously, looking ahead to the UNFCCC COP in December, and the World Humanitarian Summit in Istanbul next year. So if the takeaway point is that we're seeking coherence across those global policy agendas, I think the other point to it is our acknowledgement that the current draft, as it currently stands, is not sufficient. And I think, as I said, it's an expectation. It's about managing our expectation around that, bearing in mind the process that this goes through. It is an intergovernmental process, and there are bound to be some compromises. Let's see, is my point, what comes out of Sendai, and what we can use as leverage in those other global processes. In terms, the final point I suppose I wanted to make was that we have an opportunity in the current HFA, in the new framework, because we've got in place, or we will have in place, something that we didn't have before, which is a targets regime and an indicators regime that will come or will support that regime. And I think we really need to look to that as an opportunity. The language you will see is not necessarily terribly prescriptive, but it allows, I think, for a real kind of innovation and a real route for us to look at how we implement disaster risk reduction and resilience more broadly, and how we link it and achieve that coherence with the other global processes. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure people are thinking of some questions that follow that, but that's very helpful indeed. Ursula, thank you.